Go Ackman is a little-known platform-style action game for the Japanese Super Famicom. It was based on the Go Ackman short manga series written and drawn by Dragon Ball author Toriyama Akira that ran in the V-Jump manga magazine on an irregular basis. The manga has a total of 11 5-page chapters that were released over the course of about a year from July 1993 to October 1994. Seeing as it's a rather short manga series in both chapters and page count, you might think that Ackman wouldn't have the power to branch out into other forms of media, but that couldn't be further from the truth. The Go Ackman manga spawned a video game series that has a total of 4 games, 3 on the Super Famicom and 1 on the Game Boy, as well as an anime short that covers much of the manga series. The first game in the Super Famicom trilogy, the game we're here to talk about today, was released on December 23rd, 1994, just a few months after the end of the manga in V-Jump. It was developed and published by Banpresto, a name some of you may be familiar with, but most likely not when associated with games. Banpresto is known today as a toy and figure manufacturer, mostly focused around anime and manga characters. If you've never heard of them, just do a quick search on Banpresto, and I'm sure you'll see what I mean. The company was bought out by Bandai Namco in March of 2006, and was dissolved into their Bandai Spirits toy branch just a few years back in February of 2019. However, despite their recent association with the toy and figure industry, Banpresto got its start as a humble video game developer that worked as a contractor for Sega. After some time, they moved away from Sega and began making games that were wholly their own. Much like Go Ackman, many of these titles were licensed anime and manga games, but there were some originals as well. But I think that's enough about the developers. Let's get into the review of Go Ackman. First things first, let's address the question I'm sure most of you have at this point: what the heck is an Ackman? Ackman is a young demon whose job it is to kill as many humans as he can, collect their souls, and present them to the Demon King in return for money. The Japanese word for demon is Akuma, which is where Ackman, pronounced as Akuman in Japanese, gets his name, so sadly he didn't get his name from me. In the beginning of the game, Ackman is awoken from a short 50-year nap by his family because it's his 200th birthday, and they think it's time for him to get out and collect some souls. He excitedly agrees and quickly dashes out the door to do some evil deeds. However, before he can collect even a single soul, he is spotted by his archenemy Tenchi. Tenchi means angel in Japanese, but I'll be referring to him as Tenchi because it's his given name. As an angel, Tenchi can't stand for Ackman's evil deeds and decides to challenge him to a battle. Ackman, being much stronger than Tenchi, easily wipes the floor with him, but Tenchi isn't fazed by this loss and decides to call in the help of the angel army in order to defeat Ackman. Ackman doesn't really have anything better to do, so he decides to play along with Tenchi's plan to kill him and collect some souls along the way. This is where gameplay takes over. It's the player's job to make it through the various stages of the game by platforming and defeating as many enemies and bosses as possible to collect their souls. Between each stage, there's a small cutscene of Tenchi and his companions making plans to defeat Ackman that are honestly really funny. The dialogue in this game in general is just plain hilarious. I guess that's something to praise Toriyama for because it's his manga, but there are some liberties taken by the game here and there. For example, Archangel Mikhail, who helps Tenchi with his plans throughout the game, is nowhere to be found in the manga. The humor was definitely my favorite part about the game, and even playing it for a second time I found myself laughing at some of the jokes. My favorite part has to be when Tenchi first introduces the so-called world's greatest assassin that he hired to kill Ackman. He goes by the fearsome name of Michael Yamada. His claims to fame are he never misses his mark, he has a killer punch that always gets the job done, and he's the second rank in calligraphy. It's a dumb joke, but hearing it come from this really burly-looking assassin named Michael Yamada makes me laugh every time. And the way Tenchi reacts like he's really impressed is great too. There's a lot of funny moments throughout the game, but that's probably the one that sticks with me the most. Now that we have a good idea of what the characters and the story are like, let's take a look at the gameplay of Go Ackman. As I'm sure you've noticed by now, the game is a 2D side-scrolling platform-style game, very much akin to games like Mega Man. Ackman has a few base attacks, namely a punch, a jump kick, a crouch kick, and a charged blast attack. He also has the ability to jump on small angels' heads and then propel them forward as a sort of Cuba shell-like projectile. This is one that I used a lot over the course of the game. Ackman can also pick up a number of different weapons that change most of his attacks into an attack based on the weapon he picked up. There are a total of 3 weapons, a gun, a sword, and a boomerang-like scythe. They're all pretty straightforward in how they work, but one thing to note is that they will be lost if Ackman takes a hit. The weapon actually acts as a shield in this case, absorbing the damage and simply being lost. It's an interesting mechanic, but as the game went on, I just started to want to keep my weapon and take the damage. Weapon pickups are so sparse that losing one you like might mean not seeing it again for a long time. Another item that can be picked up and is separate from the weapons is the bomb. You can hold up to 3 at a time, and when used they will clear the screen of all enemies or deal 1 hit to a boss. I typically just saved all of mine for the bosses because, if I'm being honest, there really wasn't a time where I felt I needed to use a bomb on normal enemies. And that brings me to one of my main problems with the game, the extremely low level of difficulty. If you're looking for a challenging and well thought out platformer like Donkey Kong Country or Mega Man, I definitely would not recommend Go Ackman. The platforming is extremely basic, mostly consisting of very easy jumps that don't pose any real threat of killing you. Usually I can look past basic platforming if the ideas are fun. Take Kirby for example. Kirby platformers, especially older ones, are usually rather simplistic in their platforming, but the gameplay mechanics and fun level ideas the developers came up with make the game a joy to play. The same cannot be said for Go Ackman. There are some okay ideas towards the end of the game, but before they can really do anything with them, the game just ends. The enemies are also very simplistic, and are less threatening than even the original Super Mario Bros. Enemies. Combat usually boils down to just punching enemies a single time or jumping on their heads, which gets old really fast. Weapons, something you think would make the game more fun, usually just end up making it easier and even more of a snooze fest because you still beat everything in one hit, but have even more range now. I know a lot of other platformers have enemies that die in 1 or 2 hits, but usually they apply some sort of interesting mechanic to them that makes them harder to beat, and while Go Ackman does try this, they don't succeed at all in my opinion. The base abilities of Ackman make taking out all enemies in the game trivial, especially with a weapon equipped. Another thing that just makes the whole situation worse is that levels in Go Ackman are super short. Some of them I'm sure you can beat in under a minute. There aren't really even that many levels in the game either. It's just an overall very brief experience. My first playthrough took me about 2 to 3 hours, and my second one an hour and 15 minutes. I feel like if I went back and played it again, I'd be done in 30 minutes or less. It's just that short of a game. Which I guess is a good thing because there is no way to save your progress in this game. You have to complete the entire game in one sitting, otherwise you'll be forced to leave your Super Famicom on, as not to lose all your progress. I know the game is short, but the first time through can take upwards of 3 hours, which is a long time to just sit playing Go Ackman. I really don't know why the developers went the saveless route. I mean, bare minimum, give us some passwords for each stage so we don't have to replay everything if we don't want to play the entire game without turning the console off. What if the power goes out? Oh well, I guess you're starting from the beginning. It just baffles my mind as to how you can make a game with absolutely no save or password feature even in the Super Famicom days. One thing that does alleviate some of the pain of not having a save feature is that over the course of the game you have a number of choices of which path to take, meaning you can go a different route to the first time you played and have a different experience. There's only ever 2 choices, so once you play the game twice you've seen everything, but you have to at least give the developers credit for trying to make the game more replayable. But okay, let's take a quick break and talk about something the game does well, the visuals. Every level in Go Ackman is vividly colored and very nice to look at. There isn't really too much variation in the setting here, but the overall great look of the game makes up for that in my opinion. The animations on the enemies and the characters are all very well done. Ackman in particular has some very good flow to his movements that I love. His idle animation where he yawns is probably my favorite. The character designs are also all very nice in my opinion, even the ones that Toriyama didn't personally design. Like I said in my Dragon Quest review, I really like the way Toriyama draws monsters, and that has definitely carried over to this game as well. The dragon boss you fight in the later part of the game was probably my favorite design he did for Go Ackman. Speaking of bosses, we've got to talk about them for a minute. The bosses are probably the only part of this game that I would actually consider somewhat difficult. The ghost guy and this green fish-looking guy in particular were decently tough. The last boss, Archangel Mikhail, can also be a challenge before you learn his patterns, but as you get used to avoiding his attacks, it does become very easy. This sort of setup where the levels are very easy but the bosses take the difficulty up a notch reminds me of Demon's Crest. Now of course this game's bosses don't come anywhere close to how cool, well-designed, and challenging Demon's Crest bosses were, but they do at least follow a similar pattern. However, and that's one doozy of a however, the somewhat difficult bosses of Go Ackman morph into an absolutely baby mode version of themselves if you manage to reach them while holding a weapon. The best example of this is sadly the dragon boss. Normally you have to use the jetpack. Oh yeah, there's a jetpack you get towards the tail end of the game, by the way, to fly up and use an aerial kick on his face. But watch what happens when you have the sword and some bombs. Dead in like 3 seconds, and that's pretty much the case for everybody. Maybe the fish guy would still be a little tough just based on his mechanics, but still a weapon would make that fight much easier. It's honestly such a shame because they had the opportunity to actually make the game somewhat challenging, but completely destroyed that with the way they designed the weapons. You could take it upon yourself to not use weapons, but we shouldn't have to limit ourselves just to make a game actually challenging. One thing that's really weird about all this is that the humor and the story of Go Ackman are very mature. There's even a stripper at one point. So why is the game made for babies? It just doesn't make sense. Who is this game for? Now is usually the part of the video where I gush about how good the soundtrack was and how much I love video game music, but sadly I can't do that this time. The music of Go Ackman is not great. It's by no means bad, but it just doesn't have the same impact or catchiness of many of the other soundtracks I've looked at. Usually when I play a game I can pick out a song that really stuck in my head and left a good impression on me, but not this time. The music was all very samey, and I'm pretty sure they just reused the cutscene music for the background music in a lot of the levels. Like I said, the music isn't bad, but I do think it lacked substance. Go Ackman is a game I wanted to fall in love with so bad. I mean, it has my name in the title for crying out loud. But I just couldn't look past the myriad of problems the game suffers from. Everything from the overly easy gameplay to the lack of a basic save feature. It's such a shame because I feel like if the developers just spent a little more time coming up with interesting platforming ideas and maybe fleshed out the combat system and enemy repertoire a bit more, Go Ackman could have been a great game. Was it because this was a licensed title and they didn't really care about it? Was it because Shueisha, the company behind Jump, wanted it out quickly to play up the anime and manga better? Or were the developers just simply too inexperienced? We may never know the true answer, but what we do know is that Go Ackman is part of a trilogy for the Super Famicom, so maybe my concerns were addressed in future games. I'll have to pick them up at some point and find out. As always, thanks so much for watching all the way to the end of the video, it really means a lot to me. If you enjoyed today's review, consider giving it a like, it's always greatly appreciated and helps me out a ton. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, consider subscribing as well. Thanks again for watching everybody, and I'll see you in the next one. Ack out. Seriously, who is this game for, Toriyama? I need to know.